Greetings, travelers, and welcome to Hell. I'll be your guide this lovely evening. Welcome in, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. We are going to be doing some learning today. That is for sure. I don't actually have a topic prepared for today, so we're just going to be kind of freeballing it. But starting from next week, there's going to be a topic for each lesson, which we are going to talk about. Before we start, as disclaimer, I am not a biologist. I do this for fun. Like, I just watch a lot of documentaries and videos and stuff like that. You can find this information on your own, but also I would not take the things I say and use it for like medical advice and stuff like that. I'm going to include in the description, once it comes out, some extra videos and stuff that is relevant to the topics. In case you want to learn further. Because learning is always a good thing, and I did not come up with these facts on my own. We are gonna start with the fun fact for Monday. You know, if you really think about it, 6 legs is just the optimal number of legs. After all, hexapods are everywhere. Now, this is extremely true. The reason why 6 legs is the optimal number of legs is because if you look at the population of arthropods, not only do insects pretty much overpower everything else in there, which the other stuff in there would be stuff like crustaceans, so like crabs, arachnids like spiders and mites, and myriapods, which are centipedes and millipedes. The one who makes up the vast majority of this is insects, and not only that, but insects also make up like the vast majority of pretty much all creatures on Earth. If you're looking at the amount of species, at the amount of species and the amount of variation, and also probably in terms of number, raw number. If you don't include stuff like, obviously microbes have their own number, but if you only include the stuff that you can see without using a microscope, I do believe insects will take the top. And the reason for that is that apparently 6 legs was just an optimal choice. There's this thing in biology, you cannot have 2 types of animals occupy the same niche. And the reason why is because eventually one of them is gonna have a slight advantage over the other, and then they're just gonna outcompete them. You know, like they could be 0.01% better, and then over time, unless some big event happens, or even if they're both the same, like eventually one of them might get a hit to the population because of a disease, a new predator, whatever, like 1,000,001 things can happen. Eventually, there's going to be a change in one of them, and then the other one is just going to take the lead. So this is why you cannot like permanently have 2 similar animals occupy the same niche. And this is why stuff that wasn't insects, that got outcompeted, became predators. You know, like they had to eat something, and the only place where the niche rule doesn't really apply is predator-prey. Okay, someone took your niche, then just eat them. This is why myriapods and arachnids are mostly carnivorous. In terms of myriapods, for example, you have centipedes, which are carnivorous, and you have millipedes, which are the decius, I want to say. They eat dead plants. And you only have these 2 types. Like if you're a myriapod, you either eat bugs and small invertebrates, or you eat dead plants. There's no third type, essentially. Why? Because they got outcompeted because the bugs were just better. It's not as simple in reality as to say that just 6 legs is better. But because the ones who eventually ended up being triumphant and taking over everything were the hexapods, then there must be some kind of advantage to having 6 legs that allowed them to beat out the other types. And like this could have been anything. Maybe it's their small size, maybe it's the other stuff. For example, a lot of bugs are capable of flight because bugs evolved flight. Hexapods evolved flight rather early on, and then pretty much all their descendants have it or had it and then lost it. For example, ants used to have wings and then they lost them. Cockroaches have wings. Bees, dragonflies are some of the oldest hexapods actually, but if you want something even oldest, then you do have silverfish, which are so old that they're flightless hexapods who didn't even have flight in the first place. The fact that we see so much diversity, it means that it works. It gives some sort of advantage that lets them beat out their competitors, and now they're just everywhere. So clearly, 6 legs is the optimal number of legs. So I think that is it for this fact. Let's see what the next thing that we have in store.
Did you know? Certain ant species will herd and milk sap-eating insects. That's crazy! You can milk bugs! I want to go buy bug milk!
Certain ant species, right? We know ants, we know and love ants. They're also 6-legged and they're everywhere. Herding, which means they will collect livestock, they will take care of it, they will feed them, they will make sure to properly groom them. And milk, so like they get something out of them. It's obviously not milk, because whatever they're herding, it's gonna be smaller than them. So it's probably not a vertebrate, it's probably an invertebrate. Ants will sometimes eat sap, but sap is also hard to reach because it's inside of the tree, so you gotta get like really deep in there. If you can get something else to do the job for you, then that's great. And also sap has a problem because it has too much sugar in it. For example, with aphids, see, aphids have this thing where they eat sap and then they poop out honeydew. And this honeydew is great. And then the ants will eat this honeydew. So they don't directly eat the sap, they eat the honeydew. And the honeydew is basically concentrated sugar. It's basically a droplet of concentrated sugar. So I would assume it to be very tasty. And yes, they do eat it straight out of the butt of the aphid. Before you ask, yes, ants eat us. One of the ways that they can do this is that they will stroke the bug with their antenna, and this will cause the bug to poop out the honeydew, essentially. And this fact also means that ants were taking care of livestock before humans. There was a certain time in the history of life, of humanity, where ants were more technologically advanced than humans. That is insane to think about. Ants also have farms where they can farm mushroom, they can farm small plants. There was a fact previously talked about the leaf cutter ants, where the leaf cutter ants will cut leaves. So why do they cut leaves? Because they feed the leaves to the fungus, and then the fungus will eat the leaf, which is very hard to do because leaves have all kind of chemicals that are hard to break down. Surprise, surprise, plants do not want to be eaten. They would give it to like the fungus that can break it down, and then the fungus will start growing budding fruits, and then the ants will eat the fruits. So the next fact, Wednesday. Isn't it so weird how ocean tardigrades have these fancy tails and we don't know why? Ocean tardigrades have fancy tails and we don't know why. Ignore how I wrote tardigrades in there, or how they're not called ocean but marine. That was on me, honestly. The formal name is marine tardigrades, and yes, there are several types of tardigrades. Before you ask, tardigrades are water bears. You've probably seen them. You can look at the picture here. He's very cute. I love them. So water bears are, first of all, they're animals. They're these very, very tiny animals. They have 8 legs, and they either live in freshwater sources, or they can be terrestrial on land, or they can live in salt water, essentially. So this is why you have the terrestrial ones, the freshwater ones, and the saltwater ones. And they do not do well when you take them out from where they're supposed to be and put them somewhere else, because if you've adapted to a high level of salts, you usually do not do well when those salts are not present. But this isn't unique to them. What is unique to them is that they have these really fancy tails. You can see an example in the picture here, where they have this you see they have 8 legs, and they have these little grippers on them, which is very cute. But then they also have the tails, those massive tails. So this is a feature that, as far as I know, only the marine tardigrades have them. So you wouldn't find them in freshwater and terrestrial ones. And we don't really know why. But they are very fancy though. I've seen a lot of images of marine tardigrades, and oh boy, they look amazing, and they're very diverse. They're very diverse. Water bears are not actually one species, they're a bunch of species. There's, I think, more at least 2,000 of them, probably even more. Very diverse, very different from each other. There's a lot of them, but just the marines have them, and it's really interesting. Honestly, I don't know what else to say about this. I don't know that much about water bears. I just happened to watch a YouTube video that talked about them, and it was really interesting. I'll see if I can find it and link it in the description of this video. It's like a 40-minute YouTube video about someone who literally went into their backyard grabbed some samples from the floor and then looked at it under a microscope to see if they can find water bears. Give a clap to the water bears as we escort them off stage and move on to the next daily fact.
You know mushrooms. Mushrooms have these things called fairy rings. Fairy rings happen because mushroom roots grow outwards from a center.
Fairy rings happen because mushroom roots grow outward from a center. Let's talk about this one. This one kind of seems a little obvious, like, yeah, duh, if you have a center, things are going to grow outward in a circle. What happens is that mushrooms, as you probably know, the part that is on the outside, the thing that we usually call the mushroom, is actually just the fruit. And the main body of the mushroom is made up of this root-like structure called hyphae. The hyphae are actually like the main thing of the mushroom. Think about it, that when like a new mushroom is born, you have a center, and then from the center, a hyphae are gonna grow out. Hyphae are gonna go. The mycelium, yes. It's also the hyphae are the individual strands. The structure as a whole is called the mycelium. The hyphae, when they grow out, they will go out in search of food and minerals, and they will grow out from the center where they were born, which is why you get this center-like structure. And then naturally, the hyphae are gonna like suck out all the minerals and stuff from the ground. And then they're gonna grow the mushrooms. They're gonna grow the fruiting bodies, because the mushrooms release the spores, which is how they reproduce. So then they grow the mushrooms, and they grow them in a ring, because the hyphae grow in a ring. How big can the rings get? I don't have an exact answer, but in the image here you can see a pretty large ring. The rings may grow over 10 meters. That is pretty big. It really depends on how much food they have. See, the problem with the fairy rings, sometimes when you see a fairy ring, you'll notice that the center is more dead than the other parts. And this makes a lot of sense, because the center is spent. The center is where the mushroom grabbed all the minerals, so other stuff can't grow there. There's nothing left. The mushroom took all of it. Although they usually don't take all of it, and stuff gets added to the soil all the times, which is why sometimes you can have a fairy ring inside of a fairy ring, because stuff lives and stuff dies, and then the soil in the center starts to become rich again, and then the mushroom just grabs the stuff. If multiple species grow nearby, I would assume that they would start competing with each other. Like, I don't think you would find a ring made out of several mushrooms, or like two rings intersect. The mushrooms have an incentive to avoid each other as well. If you grow together, that means your spores are gonna disperse together, and then they're gonna have to fight with each other. Fairy rings have a pretty detailed history. They're a part of a lot of myths, a lot of expansion for why this happens, usually involving, the fairies play a prank, and if you step inside the ring, they're gonna take you away and replace you with like a demon child or something like that. There's a lot of myths about it. If you're looking for like the biggest organisms, not animals, but like organisms, then yeah, mushrooms are pretty good at doing that and going very, very big. The fairy rings sadly were the excuse for autistic children back in the day. Yes, that is a true fact. It was one of the explanations that if suddenly one day your child starts behaving strangely, it's because they walked into a fairy ring and got replaced by a demon child. This was one of the explanations for autisms, where symptoms would start to manifest at a certain age. Some people, as far as we know, autism is something that you're born with, you just have it, but the symptoms don't always show up day one, like as soon as you're born. Some symptoms can show up a little bit later, when you're a few years old. And then parents would go like, oh no, my child was replaced by a demon baby, which is a horrible thing to say. It was used as a reason for why your child would suddenly behave strange. And there can be a lot of stuff, like your child can have some sort of, like they could have gotten sick, they could have started manifesting signs of autisms or other stuff, or other neurodivergencies. And it's not very nice to call them a demon over it, I will just say. One of the main differences between animals and funguses is that funguses digest on the outside. They essentially just secrete acid and digestive enzymes to the outside of their hyphae, and then they just collect the dissolved minerals into their cells. They can do all kind of stuff with this. They can break rocks, they can dissolve soil to get out the tasty nutrients. They can dissolve dead stuff. Funguses are part of the rot cycle that makes sure that once stuff dies, the nutrients go into the soil so that other stuff can go there. And this digestive tract of the enzymes that is on the outside of them is incredibly important for the health of the soil, because the mushrooms are not the only one that eat it. There are also a lot of microbes and bacteria and stuff that kind of just live in their digestive fluids, and they also eat some of the minerals. Some of them will compete with the mushrooms, while some of them will help them by eating stuff that is harder for them to digest. Just like you have in your gut biome, where you currently have microbes inside of you that can help you digest stuff that you yourself have a hard time digesting. Mushrooms play an extremely important role for the health of like plants and animals around them, especially plants. Really important. A lot of them are symbiotic and they work together with plants because they aren't plants. They can't photosynthesize. They don't make their own food. But sometimes they will have a trade with plants where they would give them some of the minerals and stuff that they collect, and in exchange the plant will give them food. This can be done in all sorts of ways. I kind of want to use this as a fun fact, so I'm gonna stop talking here. And once we use this as a fun fact, we will have even more discussions, because I am rambling about stuff and we should probably move on to the next fun fact. I personally find it super impressive that a horned dung beetle can carry more than 1,000 times their body weight. The horned dung beetle can lift more than 1,000 times their body weight. I might have done a little goof up here. I'm not sure if lift is the right word. What should have been written here is pull. They can pull more than 1,000 times their body weight. They use this to, as you might figure out from the name dung beetle, they use this to transport dung. Dung beetles are these little pesky beetles that make these dung balls made out of poop. They eat poop because poop has a lot of nutrients in it. When you poop stuff out, it's not that the poop doesn't have any use for it. It's that your body doesn't have the right components to break it down, or that it's like dangerous and you don't want it in your body, so you flush it out. But just because you don't have the right components to break it down doesn't mean that other animals don't have the right components to break it down, which is why there are a lot of animals that eat poop. Usually bigger animals, they will eat the poop, they will digest the stuff in there that the other animal can't digest, and then they will get their nutrients. And dung beetles have this special property where they will also sometimes make balls. They will grab the poop, they will roll it in a ball, and inside of the ball will be, I think they put their eggs inside of the, I think they put eggs inside of the dung ball as well. Typically weighing 1 to 2 grams. Yeah, that checks. Yeah, that checks out. This means that they can carry, that they can pull about 1 kilogram, which is very impressive, I might say. Dung beetles are one of the, like if you define strength as how much mass can you move proportional to how much you weigh, then they're definitely one of the strongest animals in existence. They usually use this power for competing with other dung beetles over food, mates, stuff like that. They fight a lot. They fight a lot with each other. Remember how we talked earlier that hexapods are so good that they outcompeted most other stuff? This is an example of that. Beetles are an even more specialized section of hexapods that is even better than the other hexapods at everything, which is why 1 out of every 4 animal species that we know of is a beetle. Beetles are so good at outcompeting everything else that now they have to worry about competing with each other, which is why beetles have some of the most intense fights between themselves and between members of their own species for mates and resources. They're called horned because they have this massive horn at the front of their face, and they're very powerful. I don't know what else to say about this. They're extremely powerful beetles. So let's move on to the next fact. Whatever, let's move on to the next fact.
Dragonflies are the active predator with the highest hunt success rate?
Dragonflies are the active predators with the highest hunt success rate. Once again, there is a bunch of nuance that I would like to but couldn't put into the fact. So let's talk about nuance, because everything is nuanced. Dragonflies are incredibly good at hunting. They are one of nature's most specialized killing machine, especially things like flies and small invertebrates. tiny bugs. Sometimes even like very tiny like toadlets, tadpoles. That's the word I was looking for. So dragonflies, I saw one study that says that dragonfly have a hunt success rate of about 93%, which is insane to think about. Lions only have like a 30% hunt, only have like around a 30% hunt success rate. To be fair, the bigger you are, the harder it is to hunt, because big stuff usually goes for quality over quantity, while tiny stuff goes for quantity over quality. So like with flies have a bunch of children, so it's fine if your fly is not very good at surviving, because there are a bunch of other flies that are gonna survive instead. So their size is one aspect of it where it's just easier. Like small stuff is everywhere and it's smaller, so it has less room for complex mechanisms, and it's usually just worse because it's quantity over quality. It is easier for them, but also they're just very good at hunting. They can fly, they're very fast, they're relatively perceptive. For an insect, they have pretty good perception. They are incredibly powerful, and when they're a child, when they're nymphs, they have something called the mask, which, first of all, very fun name for a biological weapon. Secondly, it really does look like a mask. The way that the mask works is that it's kind of like their jaws. It's two appendages that interlock together to cover their mouth. They are spring-loaded. They have a sort of a spring-like mechanism where they can just shoot out extremely quickly. And depending on the species of the dragonfly, because dragonfly is in one species, there's a lot of them, and depending on the species, they hunt different stuff. The specific shape of the appendage can be different to accommodate different needs. So some of them might have masks that look like curved balls, and this way they can trap. They can like trap their opponents. But in other cases, they would have more of a sharp edge so that they can stab their opponent very quickly. It is really fast and very accurate. That's the thing. It's very fast and it's very accurate and it's very powerful. It's capable of shattering the armor of some small invertebrates, and this is why it is an extremely good weapon. It's fast, it's deadly, it's precise. This is why dragonflies are great. And in fact, it is so powerful, that when they shoot it out, they have a risk of being pushed back from the force. And this is why they will sometimes shoot a little jet out of their butt to counterbalance the force of the mass. I love dragonfly. Ever wondered where sex came from? Early microbes likely shared their DNA to help prepare it. And then later on this evolved into sexual reproduction. Alright, let's go to the next one. So early microbes shared DNA to help prepare it. This later evolved into sexual reproduction. Okay, let's talk about it, because there's a lot to unpack. Thank you, microbes! Let's talk about sharing DNA. Sharing DNA is an extremely important mechanism that we know about, because some microbes nowadays still do it. Specifically, it is a very useful mechanism in areas where your DNA gets damaged a lot. That means areas with high heat that are very hot, where there's like constant, because heat is like the movement of molecules, and then chemical reactions happen faster and stuff moves around, so it's like harder. It's harder to keep things stable. It's way easier to keep a DNA stable in a cold place than it is in a hot one. So what do you do if your DNA constantly gets damaged? And by damaged, it means either it means either breaking off or having bases replaced. You know, your DNA is made up of diribonucleic acid. I hope I didn't butcher it. So your DNA is made up of 4 bases and is made up of pairs. And you can remember the bases by using the acronym apples grow on trees and cars go in the garage. A always goes with T's, G's always go with C's. The specific base in the pair dictates what you're making. Of course, because DNA is the recipe for making, and it needs to be precise, and it needs to not have too many variations. mutations. If you have too many changes, eventually it's just not gonna work. You can have some changes. Most mutations are harmless and don't do anything, but you also don't want too many mutations. So if you're in a place that is very prone to damaging your DNA, like if there are toxic chemicals around, or if you're in a very hot place or a radioactive place, if you're in Chernobyl, for example, where there's constant radioactive chemicals releasing UV light that releasing all kind of dangerous radioactivity that damages your DNA, then you might want to repair it. But how do you repair it? How do you know what goes where? Well, sometimes it's easy to repair it, because if a pair doesn't match, say you have an A with a G, which you shouldn't have. A's only goes with T's. Apples grow on trees. Humans are very prepared for this sort of stuff because they have 2 sets of chromosomes. For every DNA, they have another set. So if some kind of damage happens to the first, or if the first is defunct in some way, they can use the other one. Yay! What do you do if you're a very early microbe and you don't have 2 sets of DNA? Or even if you do, what if you're in a place that is just constantly bombarding your DNA, where you take too much damage? You have to find a way to repair it, but how do you know what to put there? Like if you suddenly see an AG, how do you know if you should replace the A or replace the G? You need to have some sort of template that will tell you what is the correct fix. And that is where this fact comes in. What you do in those scenarios is that you go to your fellow microbes, which, you probably, if you're next to each other, then you probably have like shared parents or something, and you're probably very close genetically. So you share DNA with each other, and then your friend gives you their DNA, and then you repair your own DNA based on your friend's template, and that's how you know to repair it. Sometimes even chunks can get just broken off. So you just have a section of your DNA that's just gone. And, well, what do you put there? Well, you look at your friends. This mechanism is likely the thing that evolved later on to become what we know as sexual reproduction, where they don't just share it temporarily, they share it permanently. You permanently get an extra copy, because, gee, wouldn't it be handy if that extra template to fix your DNA was always with you? That sure would be handy. And it's true, and this is why incest is bad. If say your parents are siblings, then you will likely receive very similar sets of DNAs, and then if one of them has an error, then the other one will also probably have that error, which is why incest is bad. Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but I personally find it extremely fascinating to learn just which mechanism evolved into what. They liked the DNA and kept it inside them. Yeah. Bacteria have this really unique feature. They have 2 kinds of DNA. One of them is the big one that they keep inside of themselves. They clutch their pearls. They always keep it with them. But then the other one, it kind of looks like rings. It's like these DNA rings, and they can actually share them with each other. And this is a very powerful, this is one of the most powerful mechanisms that bacteria have. For example, have you ever wondered why antibiotic resistant bacteria are such a big deal? This is why. If one of them gets antibiotic resistant, they can share their DNA with the rest of the bacteria, with like the other bacteria, and then those bacteria can also learn how to become antibiotic resistant. This is such a powerful ability that it likely predated life itself. Back when life was not even like living, back when you didn't even have the first thing that you would call a living organism, you likely had these protocells that could exchange DNA with each other. It's not even clear if it's DNA. It might have been RNA at that point. But they likely exchange genetic information with each other, and then the genetic information that was best at propagating, big shock, big whoopers, and then he went around the most. And so a lot of them had it, and then you had mutations, and then there will be someone who is even better, and then everyone would have that one. And then eventually it just kept getting better and better at maintaining itself, that you get, boom, cell, first cell, Luca. Luca stands for least common universal ancestor, and it's pretty much the name for like the first life. if you're very good at dealing with cold environments, then that means you're likely not good at surviving hot environments. Of course, some things have unexpected side effects, like a lot of heat adaptations also help with radioactivity, because a lot of heat damage is similar to the damage that is caused by radioactivity, mainly the DNA stuff. The DNA, the more chemical reactions happening because there's more energy in the system. Because the radioactivity is like constantly releasing out high energy particles. I think a good example of this is I gave a fact a few weeks ago about strain 121. Strain 121 is a type of bacteria of, archaea, not bacteria, by default, is a type of archaea that is capable of surviving and reproducing in temperatures of up to 121 degrees Celsius. Which is very impressive. If you put me in 121 degrees Celsius, I probably wouldn't be reproducing. A lot of archaea that is similar to this have extremely thick and heavy membranes. Their membranes are very, very viscous and thick and heavy. The idea is that when you're in a very hot environment, things move, and things move a lot. Your membrane is constantly moving. The chemicals that you're trying to interact with are constantly moving. Your proteins are constantly changing shape, even though they shouldn't, which is why you need ways to resist this change. So one of the ways that you can do this is, for example, have thicker membrane, where it just becomes harder to move your membrane. Even in higher heat, it doesn't move as much, and it's more stable. But this is a double-edged sword. Take something with this kind of membrane and put it in an environment that it doesn't even have to be cold. Like put it in like 60 degrees Celsius, and it's gonna have a very bad time because its membrane is so hard to move. Suddenly, it doesn't move anymore when the temperatures go down. What do you do now? You still need it to perform all kind of functions, like making sure that chemicals from the outside get inside and taking toxic stuff and putting it outside of your cell. A lot of other stuff can have added costs that, while themselves wouldn't kill you, they make it harder. For example, in order to deal with the fact that the proteins of strain 101 are constantly changing shape, because again, it's very hot, things are moving around a lot, there's a lot of interactions happening. It's the same reason why when you put like meat in the oven, it becomes soft and chewable afterwards. Because the proteins, they get denatured, they break down, they change shape. They aren't able to do their job anymore. Same thing happens to the proteins inside of the cell while it's alive, because it's basically being cooked all the time. It's cooked. So it has special proteins that can go to proteins that folded and fold them, that like unfolded, and fold them back. Now this is great if your proteins are constantly being unfolded, because then you can fold them back, they get in the right shape, and they can do their job again. But proteins, form equals function. The way that it's built is the thing that it does. If it's shaped like a key, then it's gonna go into a lock. That's just the nature of these things. So what happens is, if you're in a colder environment where you don't have to worry about protein damage, you're still gonna have all of those proteins that refold the folded proteins, but now you're not gonna use them anymore because your proteins don't get folded as much, because don't get unfolded as much because you're in a colder environment. So now you're just making a bunch of extra stuff that you don't need. Waste of resources. It's not gonna kill you outright, but the fact that you spend more resources than your friends, if resources become scarce, you're gonna do worse because you waste more of them. You're less efficient at using them. You can literally think of yourself as a fire. You can imagine life as a fire. It's a fire that's constantly raging. And fires, in order to be able to keep raging, it needs to burn something. It needs something to burn. It needs fuel. And because you constantly need that fuel, if it ever runs out, then the fire disappears, because the fire is the chemical process of turning the fuel from one chemical into another. So you constantly need new chemicals to replace the ones that you've already converted. And if you don't have any new chemicals, the fire goes out and you die. And fire is actually a really good metaphor for life, because that's essentially what's happening when you eat food. Metabolism, like the process of metabolism of turning food into energy, is kind of like a controlled burning process. Take a flammable thing, aka sugar, boom, energy. Now, I believe we talked about all the facts, and I'm gonna reward myself with a piece of chocolate. This is a new chocolate that I just bought at the grocery store a few hours ago. It tastes like chocolate. Who would have thought?